While a pair of shoes may last a while, a memory can last forever. Of course, depending on what kind of shoe it is and how old you were during your experience, these measurements are subject to change. But in my opinion, it's important to understand the obsessive grasp that consumption and possession seem to hold on our society today. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, within your way of thinking." Now, to lay down a few ground rules, I don't believe there's anything wrong with liking nice things. Going shopping to reward yourself for a big achievement or to brighten a dark day isn't anything to feel guilty about. Where I begin to become concerned is that minuscule meeting point between the two topics in which their importance and the happiness they grant an individual begin to blur. Does a nice object really make us happy? Or is it a happiness we delude ourselves into desiring when an experience could be just as satisfying? While a memory can last as long as we can remember it, in the grand scheme of things, a pair of shoes is fleeting. During the summertime, I work at a zoo around 2 hours north of New York City. Trevor Zoo is one of the only zoos in the US affiliated with a high school, and it's also a place I grew up visiting. Working there, I have learned much about both life and many animals, but one animal situation in particular has always stuck out to me, that of an otter named Cassie. You see, for as long as I've worked there, Cassie has lived in the infirmary ward of the zoo. The story goes that a couple of years ago, the zoo staff tried to introduce her to the outdoor enclosure and the other otter, Nash. The two did not get along. They ended up physically fighting, and Cassie, having been more injured and older, wound up in the infirmary, where she would spend much longer than anticipated, being nursed back to health, but also simply waiting. You see, there was nowhere Cassie could live if Nash and she were unable to get along. And while she could sometimes be irritating, as she had developed the ability to open shift doors that separated her enclosure compartments, a home that small is not what anyone expected nor wanted for her. One day, I made a casual comment to one of the full-time zookeepers, declaring that I felt a little sorry for her. Interestingly, this staff member actually thought Cassie was completely fine. Maybe it was because she wasn't quite aware of what she could have had as a full-time, high-end home, or maybe it was because she had learned to make the most of what she did have. I mean, swimming in her pool while it was being filled had become one of her favorite pastimes. She clearly found joy in the less than ideal situation and learned to make the most of what she did have. It was all within her way of thinking. And if an otter can do this, why can't we? Now, we may never be able to know the exact thoughts in Cassie's head, but her situation made me wonder about the things I take for granted in life. And if all I've ever really needed to live a fulfilling life is already right in front of me. Take a look down at your shoes. What do you think of when you see them? Is it their brand, their color, the fact that your friend has the same pair? Could you see them for something more than that? They might be a treasured possession, but I'd urge you to take a closer look, to look at them for not just what they are, but where they've taken you. An afternoon spent lounging in the park with your siblings and dog, or a summer night out with friends. Are they scuffed up, or are they pristine and polished, kept in good condition? Are they new? Are they waiting to be filled with memories? In my eyes, there is a fine line between possession and experience. The two are most certainly interconnected, but while one begs for the spotlight, needing to be bought and used, the other remains backstage, knowing that its importance trumps the former and waiting for you to realize that. Just as I like to think Cassie has. We go through life racking up possessions like points in a game. We spend and we buy things we need, but also many things we don't. But at what point does spending begin to dominate our lives? A reliance on an inanimate object to bring a few fleeting moments of joy before it's stashed into the back of the closet for the next 3 decades shouldn't be the norm. This brings me to the topic of how to fix this problem I spelt out. I think many of us are familiar with the Marie Kondo organizational system, in which we hold up an item and simply ask ourselves, does this bring me joy? If no, toss it. If yes, keep it. Marie's system of simply asking oneself and gauging our initial reaction ties nicely into the theme of the importance of experience versus possession. While it is an inanimate object, its fate is determined by the feelings and the emotions that it unearths from its owner. Of course, Marie's system isn't always linked directly to whether or not an object sparks a memory. In fact, it's sometimes important to eliminate an object kept for sole sentimental value, especially if it might be suited in the hands of another. But methods such as Marie Kondo's, among others like Swedish death cleaning, in which you think ahead to who will inherit your possessions once you are dead, are helpful in determining what should be kept, what shouldn't, and what was probably not necessary to have bought in the first place, outlining a way to reevaluate one's possessions, understand their past choices, and to think ahead to the future, to the next time they go out to shop. To not only wonder, but to ask oneself, do I really need this? Is instrumental in realizing that in most cases, you probably didn't, and you probably won't. Personally, I was never a child who enjoyed shopping for clothes. Even at a young age, I would feel an absurd amount of stress and guilt for spending money that, first of all, wasn't mine, and second of all, on something I knew couldn't last me forever. As I grew older and this feeling persisted, I ended up inheriting a lot of my clothing from my older sister and my mom. With this system, I felt no guilt, since it had already been worn, and if it wouldn't continue to be worn, the piece of clothing would either be thrown away or in most cases donated. There was no situation where I could lose. And I think, in a way, this idea has translated and transformed into an important value of mine. I've learned that the possession doesn't always matter. It's the experiences that count. I'm fortunate to have a close group of people I grew up with and a family I enjoy being around. Going through life with sisters and parents who were never quite worried about having lots of stuff exposed me to a multitude of unique experiences that have shaped who I am and who I will become. And I think that is something I will treasure forever, far, far longer than any piece of clothing. For to absorb happiness from something that is bought is temporary, but to gain happiness through a unique lifetime of people and experiences is eternal. Perhaps that's why I always keep beautiful Cassie on my mind. Thank you.